All right, joining me now to discuss Jeffrey Scott Watson's testimony is criminal defense attorney Rebecca Nitkin and in-session contributor and law enforcement analyst Mike Brooks. Welcome to you both. Rebecca, let me start with you. One of the fundamental rules about cross-examination is leading questions only and never asking a question that you don't know the answer to. How do you think this defense lawyer is doing in cross-examining this witness?
Well, he's having a little bit of difficulty, but we know what he's trying to do. He's trying to get Mr. Watson to state on the record that he knew darn well that Andrea asked the defendant to go into the office to get her laptop the same day that she learned that her husband had been murdered. And he's having a difficult time doing that. However, despite the fact that the questions have been withdrawn, they're still out there. And he's painting a picture, so he's doing just fine.
That's right.
Can I ring that bell?
And you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Exactly.
And Mike Brooks, let's talk about the videotape evidence. What does this mean to you? What does the timeline mean to you, both in terms of the prosecution's theory and what the defense is trying to do with the insanity defense? Well,
it shows that, you know, was he insane if he could plan all this out? Because he was there early in the morning. He usually gets there between 7:45 and 8:15. This was totally out of his routine, Darren. And then you see him, you know, he went to great lengths to make sure he left his cell phone in another part of the Atlanta metro area before he went back to the Dunwoody daycare. And he was in, you know, he was in a minivan. They saw him come in. Didn't he think that they would be able to see his movements? And why check out 2 visitors' badges? That's just, well, I would say that's just crazy, but in this particular case, I don't think he is. You know, it was very well planned out. And why did he have to go to use those visitors' badge? He didn't have any visitors. You know, if I'm security at GE, I'm going to say, if you sign out a visitor's badge, I want to see that visitor, and I'm going to take their picture, just like they do here at Turner. When you have a visitor, they take a picture of them and with a time code and everything else to say, okay, this is a visitor of Mike Brooks.
Well, but Mike, let me throw this one out to Rebecca. Rebecca, knowing, you got to figure, he knows about all those security protocols.
Right.
So doesn't it feed into the defense theory that he's got to be crazy? He's got to be criminally insane. No rational person would do that. What do you think?
And Mike, didn't Mike say he's got to be crazy? It's kind of like he gets...
You said it, Mike.
Crazy like a fox. Crazy like a fox. Not insane.
It's kind of like, you know, he gets the bursa, which is imported from Argentina. Then he goes back to the gun, to De Silva, and he says, oh, something bad happened with the gun. I threw it in the lake. And everybody talks about him being so tight-lipped, but then he's telling people, oh, I have an affair, and back to the gun store, whatever you do. You know, everything he does is off balance. So, like Mike said, he's crazy. There's something going on here that is not right.
I think he's not right, but is he criminally insane? Did he know right from wrong? Absolutely. Otherwise, he wouldn't have planned it out this way.
Well, let's talk about that. Rebecca, normally, if a defendant is insane, we don't think that they're going to be engaged in activity to cover up the crime. If you're covering it up, it shows that you know right from wrong. How do you think the defense can work to diffuse that kind of argument?
Look, you have to remember, it has to be at the time of the crime, and they spent a lot of time laying the foundation for what happened. We talked all about the delusions that he's seeing, and we are not talking about somebody who is actively psychotic. People are used to people that are running around seeing Jesus in the sky or something like that. When you deal with the delusion with this guy, you see the cracks, you see the problem, and at the incident, at the time of the crime, they have to get into his head, and Andrea was in his head, and this is all about Andrea, and we're going back and forth on different issues, so they have a shot. What was he thinking about? Did he have to protect her children? Was he crazy at the time, in love with her? Women have brought down presidents. Eve brought down Adam. Senators have been brought down from New York to Washington, D.C. What was going on in his head at that precise moment?
Great points all. Mike, let me ask you, in the theater of trial, because obviously trials do involve an element of theater, how do you think that the show and tell, playing videos. Does that stuff really make a difference with jurors?
Oh, absolutely. The more visual, you look at adult learning methodology. If you read something, you retain so much, and you can really fill it out. But if you get to see it right in front of you, that's even better for the jury, because they're watching all this and they're saying, oh, okay, he was there at 5:30 something, but he normally gets there 7:45 to 8:15. This is totally out of his routine. Is this guy insane? It doesn't look this way. I don't think it looks that way to the jury if there's so much planning.
Right. Rebecca and Mike, thank you so much.
Thank
of course, the one question I did not get to ask Mike Brooks is, who cuts your hair?
We go to the same
You're
barber.
a handsome man. All right. Moving on. The prosecution's next witness in Georgia versus Newman is forensic